For decades, WrestleMania has given us moments that are etched into history. Hogan slamming Andre, the boyhood dream coming true, the end of an undefeated streak. But on April 3rd, 2022, inside a packed AT&T Stadium, WWE promised us something different. They called it the biggest WrestleMania match of all time. And honestly, it was hard to argue with them. This was a collision of two eras, two mindsets, and two dominant champions. For the first time at WrestleMania, the WWE Championship and the Universal Championship were on the line in a single, winner-take-all war. This wasn't just about a title, it was about absolute supremacy. It was about crowning the one undisputed king of the industry. This is the story of how two of WWE's most destructive forces, Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns, finally reached their endgame. This is the story of the night history was made. The rivalry between Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar is a story that was 7 years in the making. A saga of brutal fights, betrayals, and a non-stop quest for the top spot. They'd clashed at WrestleMania before, twice actually, but the final showdown on the grandest stage was something else entirely. This wasn't the rising hero Roman Reigns trying to slay the monster champion anymore. No, this was far more interesting. This was a war between two alpha predators, both at the absolute peak of their powers and each holding one of the company's biggest prizes. On one side, you had the tribal chief, the head of the table, Roman Reigns. For well over 500 days, he'd held the Universal Championship in an iron grip, transforming from a divisive hero into a universally acknowledged, villainous conqueror. His reign was defined by cold, calculated cruelty, backed by his family, the bloodline, and guided by the master manipulator, his special counsel, Paul Heyman. On the other side stood the Beast, Brock Lesnar. But this wasn't the same grim-faced mercenary we knew. This was a revitalized, almost cheerful force of nature. Cowboy Brock, with his ponytail and a genuine smile, seemed to be having the time of his life while still being the most terrifying man in the building. And caught right in the middle? Paul Heyman, the man who had famously advocated for Lesnar for years before masterminding Roman's rise to power. His loyalty was the central, dramatic question hanging over the entire feud. The road to WrestleMania 38 was paved with chaos and betrayal. The story really caught fire at SummerSlam in 2021 when Brock Lesnar made a shocking return to stare down Roman Reigns, instantly making everyone wonder where Paul Heyman's allegiance truly stood. That tension simmered for months, leading to a match at Crown Jewel, where Reigns, with a little help from the Usos, managed to squeak out a win over Lesnar. But the tribal chief grew paranoid, convinced his Wiseman was secretly still working with the Beast. This all came to a head when Reigns viciously fired Heyman, thinking he'd cut the final tie between his past and present. Their scheduled rematch at the Day 1 pay-per-view was suddenly called off after Reigns tested positive for COVID-19. So what happened? In a wild twist, the now free agent Brock Lesnar was thrown into the WWE Championship match that same night, and he won. Just like that, Lesnar was a world champion again, and a giddy Paul Heyman was seemingly back by his side. The board was reset. Now both men were champions. A bold Lesnar walked on to SmackDown and challenged Reigns to a champion versus champion, title for title match. Reigns said no. The breaking point finally came at the Royal Rumble. During Lesnar's WWE Championship defense against Bobby Lashley, Roman Reigns interfered, spearing the Beast out of his boots. Then, in the ultimate betrayal, Paul Heyman handed Reigns the WWE title belt, revealing his true loyalty all along. As Reigns stared down at the fallen Lesnar, Heyman walked away, his choice finally made. He was with his tribal chief. A stunned Lesnar lost his title, but his night wasn't over. Fueled by an incredible rage, Lesnar entered the Men's Royal Rumble match at number 30 and just demolished everyone, winning the match and punching his ticket to the main event of WrestleMania. His choice was obvious. He wasn't just coming for revenge, he was coming for everything. He immediately challenged Roman Reigns for the Universal Championship, but that wasn't enough. Lesnar won his WWE title back a month later inside the brutal Elimination Chamber, officially making their WrestleMania encounter a champion versus champion winner. Takes all war. With the match set, the feud went from professional to deeply personal. The contract signing wasn't just a formality, it was a war of words. Reigns, surrounded by his bloodline, declared the match was the biggest of all time simply because he was in it, and that Lesnar would be forced to acknowledge him. Lesnar, in his classic Cowboy Brock style, just laughed it off, treating the tribal chief's threats like a joke, which only infuriated Reigns. The weeks that followed were filled with brutal ambushes. One of the most unforgettable moments happened at Madison Square Garden. After Lesnar defended his title, he was jumped by the Bloodline. Reigns grabbed the steel ring steps and bludgeoned a helpless Lesnar, leaving him bloody in the middle of the ring. Holding both titles high, Reigns screamed, "Brock Lesnar, you're gonna acknowledge me!" It was a chilling preview of his real goal, not just to win, but to humiliate his greatest rival. The mind games were nonstop. On SmackDown, the Bloodline found their private locker room completely destroyed. The culprit? Of course, it was Brock Lesnar, who had used a forklift to tear a door off a truck and smash up their sanctuary, sending a clear message that no one was safe. He chased Reigns and the Usos right out of the building, screaming that he was coming for blood. Each man was trying to break the other's will before they even stepped in the ring. Reigns styled himself as the master strategist who had already taken everything from Lesnar, his advocate, his title, and his blood. Lesnar, on the other hand, was pure chaos. He didn't need speeches. His actions did the talking. He was a predator toying with his prey, and as WrestleMania got closer, the tension was almost unbearable. The atmosphere inside AT&T Stadium on WrestleMania Sunday was absolutely electric. As Roman Reigns made his slow, deliberate entrance, flanked by Paul Heyman, you could feel the weight of his historic reign. But when Brock Lesnar's music hit, the energy exploded. The smiling Cowboy Brock was gone. In his place stood the Beast Incarnate, all business. As the legendary ring announcer Mike Rome began to introduce him, Lesnar snatched the microphone. In a pure alpha move, he introduced himself, then turned to Roman's corner. "And the man who is going to get his ass kicked by me tonight, your undisputed Universal Champion, Roman Reigns." The message was clear. No more games. This was a fight. The bell rang, and it was on. Lesnar immediately ripped off his gloves, a callback to their first WrestleMania match, signaling he was here to do serious damage. He completely overwhelmed Reigns, driving him into the corner with brutal shoulder thrusts. He didn't waste any time, taking Reigns straight to Suplex City with a series of thunderous belly-to-belly suplexes that sent the champion flying. Lesnar was in total control, tossing the head of the table around like a rag doll. Reigns looked completely stunned, his composure shattered by the Beast's ferocity. Lesnar tossed Reigns out of the ring and stalked him, but that's where the first mistake happened. Lesnar turned his attention to Paul Heyman, giving him a menacing stare. That brief distraction was all Roman Reigns needed. He shot forward like a missile and drove Lesnar through the ringside barricade with a massive spear. The impact sent both men and a section of the wall crashing down, and just like that, the tide began to turn. The Beast was finally hurt. The tribal chief had drawn first blood. Back in the ring, Reigns pressed his advantage. He stalked the wounded Lesnar and hit a second spear. He went for the cover. 1, 2, and Lesnar kicked out. A look of pure disbelief washed over the tribal chief's face. He'd hit his finisher twice, and it wasn't enough. He got to his feet, cocked his fist, and delivered a Superman punch. Then another. But as Reigns celebrated, he turned around to a terrifying sight. Brock Lesnar was on his feet, laughing. The punishment was only fueling the Beast. Lesnar absorbed the blows and waved him on, a sadistic grin on his face. He then grabbed Reigns and started the suplexes all over again. One German suplex, a second, a third, fourth, and fifth. Each one was more vicious than the last, dropping Reigns on the back of his neck. But Reigns wouldn't stay down. He fought back, hitting a third Superman punch that stunned the Beast again. As he charged in for another spear, Lesnar showed incredible agility, leaping over Reigns and hoisting him onto his shoulders for a thunderous F5. This had to be it. Lesnar's most protected move. He made the cover, 1, 2, and somehow Roman Reigns kicked out. The stadium absolutely erupted. Both men had thrown their biggest shots and both were still in it. The match was now a pure war of attrition. The question wasn't who was stronger anymore, but who could possibly endure more pain. The match entered its most desperate phase. As both men struggled up, Reigns charged, but Lesnar was ready. He ducked, scooped Reigns up for another F5, but Roman's flailing legs accidentally knocked out the referee. With no ref, Reigns did what he had to do. He hit Lesnar with a blatant low blow, a cowardly move born from desperation. As the crowd rained down boos, Paul Heyman slid the Universal title belt into the ring. Reigns smashed it across Lesnar's head, payback for the Royal Rumble. A new ref slid in as Reigns made the cover. 1, 2, and Brock Lesnar kicked out again. The tribal chief was losing his mind. He'd used every dirty trick he had, and the Beast was still alive. What would it possibly take? As Reigns rained down forearms, something inside Lesnar just snapped. He weathered the storm and saw his opening, locking Reigns into the Kimura lock, the same submission he used to break Triple H's arm. Lesnar wrenched back on Roman's shoulder with everything he had. The pain on Roman's face was agonizing. He was trapped. His historic reign was seconds from ending. Paul Heyman, seeing his tribal chief about to tap, screamed from ringside while pushing the bottom rope as close as he could to Roman's hand. With his last bit of strength, Reigns lunged, his fingers barely grazing the rope to force the break. Lesnar was a split second from winning, but the tribal chief had survived. In the struggle, however, Reigns had suffered a legitimate shoulder injury, and the arm Lesnar had been targeting was now visibly hurt. The end came fast. A wounded but determined Lesnar got Reigns up on his shoulders, looking for one last match-ending F5, but Reigns' shoulder had given out. As Lesnar tried to adjust for the dead weight, Reigns slipped out behind him, bounced off the ropes, and used one last burst of adrenaline. He drove his good shoulder into Lesnar's midsection, hitting one final earth-shattering spear. He collapsed onto Lesnar for the cover. The referee's hand hit the mat. 1, 2, 3. It was over. Roman Reigns had pinned Brock Lesnar. He had conquered the Beast at WrestleMania. The crowd's reaction was a mix of cheers, boos, and total shock. The brutal war had come to such a sudden end. Roman Reigns, struggling to even lift his arms from the pain, was handed both the WWE and Universal Championships. With Paul Heyman's help, he rose to his feet and held both titles in the air, the living symbol of his absolute control over the entire industry. He was the undisputed WWE Universal Champion. He walked into WrestleMania as the tribal chief and left as the one undisputed king. The unification of the titles at WrestleMania 38 was a huge moment for WWE. For over a year, Roman Reigns reigned as the undisputed champion, carrying both belts as a symbol of his power. But the WWE landscape is always changing. In April 2023, a new World Heavyweight Championship was created for Raw, which ended the era of a single world champion. Roman was eventually presented with a single new title belt to represent his undisputed WWE Championship, and the Universal Championship's lineage was officially retired after WrestleMania 40, leaving the historic WWE Championship to continue its legacy. But the match at WrestleMania 38 was more than just a collection of big moves. It was the climax of a 7-year saga and the final chapter in the biggest rivalry of the modern era. It was the night Roman Reigns finally beat his greatest nemesis on the grandest stage, cementing a legacy years in the making. It was the night the Beast finally met his conqueror, and it was the night the tribal chief took his permanent seat at the head of the table, not just as a champion, but as the one true ruler of his universe. What did you think of this historic match? Was it the biggest of all time? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoy deep dives into wrestling history, make sure to like and subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks for watching.